Well, good evening, everybody. This is Pastor Ray Garcia, and this lecture is intended for our Eastern University Youth Ministry Urban Ministry course. This is our third lecture, and I wanted to take some time to introduce the concept of gospel incarnational living. Gospel incarnational living. When we think about the idea of gospel incarnational living, what we're ultimately talking about is what Christ first modeled, what the church has then been charged to replicate, and what the church has been doing for 2,000 years already. The call to come and live amongst the others, the call to intentionally invest in the life of others. I mean, we see this all throughout the New Testament. We see Paul writing letters to the church in his epistles. We see the charge to follow me while I follow Christ. That call to live a life that is replicable of the person that has first modeled it by the way they themselves were following Jesus. I can attest to you firsthand that the reality of my fellowship with Jesus, of my following Christ, in large part has indeed been modeled off of men in my life over the years who have lived incarnation, lived amongst me. They have modeled being a Christ follower, that I was able to see that and to say, oh, okay, this is what it means to follow Jesus. When we think specifically about the urban context, and for the rest of our time here this evening, that is where we'll be focusing in on. I want to walk us through three questions. The first question is, who are we? And when I say who are we, what I mean is the church. Who are we? Who are we called to be? No matter what our context, urban, suburban, rural, no matter what context we're talking about, we are still called to be the church. We pick up the Gospel of Matthew in the 28th chapter, and we see Jesus having resurrected and gathered again with the disciples, and then giving them the Great Commission, the charge to go and be the church. And as Jesus defines the commission that they were charged to, as Jesus gives them their marching orders, the marching orders was to go into all the world, preaching the good news of the gospel, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that He commanded them. And He gives them the promise that He would be with them forever while they did that. The charge that Jesus gave the disciples, that the disciples have passed on to the church, and the church has passed on for 2,000 plus years now, is to indeed live out the Great Commission, this charge of reaching the lost, teaching the lost, equipping the lost to follow Jesus. So when we answer, in an effort to answer the question, who are we? We recognize our marching orders. We are a people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people set apart, chosen by God to live out a commission or a charge. And that commission and charge is to find others who don't yet know the promises of who Jesus is and the invitation to new life, to offer them those promises and that invitation, and then to teach them, to equip them to obey, to follow the teachings of Christ. So who are we? We're a people sent on a purpose. We're a city on a hill. We're a church chosen by God to carry out the work of God here on earth. As we think about that in any context, we can immediately begin to recognize how critical this role is. Well, far more critical this role is when we think about this in a context in which there are a number of other things that are stacked against this charge. There are a number of other levers that are pulled that make this charge even more of a heightened sense of urgency. In our urban communities, we find a number of families that are broken, a number of households that are not intact. We find a number of young people that are seeking for leadership, mentorship, that are craving a presence of someone who is able to invite them to follow after them. Now, that's not exclusively an urban situation. We find that in many probably in all contexts. However, we recognize that in our urban communities, this is a heightened situation. So as we continue to explore who are we now have to identify who the who are we is. So it's not enough to say the church as a whole. We have to be a bit more specific when we think through this. This goal for incarnational living, for coming alongside of, for being, so in my community we call this doing life with. This idea of coming alongside, of sistering, of holding up, of strengthening. This is something that we see in mentors, in coaches, in teachers, in social workers, in parenting. We see this in extended family members, especially when we have like 2 and 3 generation homes. We see this in community organizers and people who gather folks together. One of the beautiful things that helps to offset the difficulties that I've been speaking about is the reality of the concept of it takes a village. The reality of a plethora of people coming together to achieve this goal. So that's who we are. We're spread across many different social dynamics. We're spread across different career paths. We're spread across different titles and functions. But together, we embrace this charge to invite young people to maturity in Christ. But what holds us back from achieving that? That's my second thing I want to dig in with you on. What holds us back from achieving, from helping these young people to achieve their goals, from helping young people in our urban communities to strive toward their preset goals? I think it can be boiled down into 3 factors. The first is education. There is no doubt about it, and there's no way to excuse it. Education in our urban communities is a place of serious contention. There's no easy answer to how to fix it. We've seen everything from private and charter schools seeking to come and be a part of this. We've seen homeschooling take a larger space. We've seen cyber schools and public education. We could talk for days on days about the difficulties of the education system in our urban communities. And let me not cast a sweeping generalization. There are bright spots in our urban education spaces. There are schools that are doing things dynamically. There are some of the greatest education spots in our country are found in our urban communities. But that is not true across the board in our urban spaces. There are many schools that are underperforming, that are underfunded, that are understaffed, that are overpopulated. And for those and many other reasons, we see education failing in our urban spaces. We see the retention rate dropping in our urban spaces. So one of the things that holds our students back from thriving or growing toward their goals is the reality of the brokenness of our education systems. The second thing reminds me of one thing my mom always told me when I was a kid. She always said when I was a kid, you are who you hang with, so pick good friends. The reality is the community around us really influences us. I mean, think about it. Think about things that you like, things that you're drawn to. Now think about the people that you like and you're drawn to. You tend to find similarities there. You tend to find groups of folks who like similar things or want to participate in similar activities. The community we're in drastically affects one's ability to achieve their goals. Are you surrounded by people who are upward motivated? Are you surrounded by people who are helping to identify points of growth? For our youngest people in our spaces, are they surrounded by folks who are pointing them to positive and points of maturity? Specifically in a church, are we gathering youngest to oldest? Are we gathering them in? Are we teaching, discipling, equipping, coaching, mentoring? Are we helping young people? Specifically in our urban communities, are we helping young people to see not a way out, not just, hey, how do I make it? And by make it, I mean find myself no longer a part of this urban community. That's not what we're suggesting. But are we finding a way to equip young people so that they can achieve their goals as maturing followers of Christ? Well, I think there's one more real hurdle that holds us back from truly seeing a measured success with students reaching their goals. I don't think we help them set goals very well. I suggest to us that we have unrealistic and unobtainable ideas that may in some way count toward being a goal but are not clearly identified. One of my heroes in the faith is a man named Albert Tate, and just recently in an interview for Christianity Today, I believe it was, in an interview for Christianity Today, I believe it was, that he shared this. He said, we have bought a lie, and that lie is we can be anything we want to be. And he went on to give a fun illustration about having been told that lie at a very young age. He set his desires in mind that he wanted to be a professional basketball player. The only problem was he has absolutely no skills when it comes towards basketball. Below average skill set. And regardless of how hard he tried or how much he believed, there were some things that were just out of reach. And this was one of those ideas. Now look, I know this is not a popular thought because the popular thought is to say if we work hard enough, if we take the right steps, that we can achieve anything. And I know that there are stories of great victories, of the overcomer. And here in the city of Philadelphia, we live by these stories. The whole Rocky, Rocky saga, right? Like that whole thing is built on this idea that we could do anything. And I get it. There is some truth to that narrative. But I also believe that one of the major drawbacks towards young people actually maturing in their faith and their ability to reach their goals is they have not been taught how to set obtainable goals. Now, this might not seem crucial or critical in other spaces, but in our urban context, One of the reasons why this is so crucial and critical is that these obtainable goals carry us toward the next. They continue to motivate us, and they continue to help us to see our way forward. Education is a hurdle. The lack of community investment, or positive community investment, may be a better way to say that, is a hurdle. And unobtainable goals being set is a hurdle. So what do we do about it? What does successful growth look like for our urban youth? I think successful growth looks like this. 1, helping young people to excel academically. Many of our churches across our cities have recognized this goal. Not only it's a lofty goal, but not only does it need to be a goal for us, it needs to become an obtainable goal. And the ways in which they have gone about creating this as an obtainable goal, are encouraging in themselves and motivating in themselves, inspiring even. Everything from creating education systems for students to be a part of, to creating support systems to go alongside of education systems, to investing in themselves. Local churches, local churches investing in the public education sphere in an effort to help underperforming schools become better performing schools, in an effort to help underserviced students receive additional services, in an effort to help underfunded schools have the supplies and resources they need in order to point students towards excelling academically. This is a role that many would think comes in addition to, but I would say in our urban context, it is a reality of being the church. It's not an afterthought for the church. It is part of what it means to be the church in our urban context. Success for our youth means excelling academically. It also means becoming a producer, no longer a consumer, but a contributor. We want to help young people see their way forward to the point of actually becoming an investor back in the communities that they have been a part of. For far too long, the idea of excelling, the idea of making it, meant that you were leaving your community and going to the brighter places. You were heading to the suburbs or heading outward of the city. Well, I actually want to suggest to us that helping young people in our urban context excel means that we're creating a pathway for them to come back and become a contributor, an investor in their own space. And when I say investor, I mean literally they are people who are helping in the environment, in the space, in the atmosphere that they were brought up in, that they have been a part of. And so when we see that, that's when we say, we've made it. That's when we're saying that's the picture of what it looks like to be a church that's producing, or a community that's producing young people who have made it. The third way that we see successful growth for young people forward is incarnational living. We see them actually embodying the idea of saying, follow me on the path that I have taken, that you might have measured success as well. Incarnational living was first modeled by Jesus for us. Leaving the heavens, Jesus comes and lives amongst his people. And while living amongst his people, he creates the invitation for them to follow along, to come and see, to understand a bit more of what it looks like to be a Christ follower, or in that case, a follower of the Father. Jesus passed on that baton to the church in the Great Commission. And we pick up that mantle of responsibility here. A successful growth for students in our urban communities means that we've created a pathway for incarnational living. We've surrounded them in their formative years with mentors and coaches and teachers and social workers and church moms and church dads and extended family and an entire community that have helped to foster and strengthen the call to Christ, to support these youth in what have been some of the most trying times of their life. And success is measured by our ability to create the pathway to see these young people to a point of maturity where they are reinvesting in their own community. At 16 years old, I got invited to a church for the first time. And after beginning to attend that church, about 3 months into attending that church, I came to trust in Jesus to be the Lord of my life. What happened that day, the night that I trusted in Jesus, continued for the rest of my days in high school. There were a couple of men in my church who said, we're going to begin to show up in your life. And we're going to just begin to invest in you. Now, I don't remember what language they used when they said that. But I can tell you now, looking back, what they did is they lived incarnationally with me. They showed up. They taught me what it meant to be a young and maturing Christian. They taught me what it meant to become a young and maturing man. They taught me what it meant to set obtainable goals, to strive towards reaching those goals, to surround myself with a group of people who would help me to understand all of the ways in which I would walk the days going forward, and to begin to see who I am through the lens of who God has called me to be and how He already sees me. Friends, as we think about our urban communities and we think about the youth in our space, I want to charge us. Let's explore what it means to have gospel incarnational living that supports, that undergirds, that inspires, that challenges, and that equips the youth in our communities toward reaching their new goals, excelling academically, becoming a producer or a contributor in their community, and once again taking on the mantle of responsibility to live incarnationally, inviting others to follow me while I follow Christ.